The World Bank has a mandate to alleviate global poverty, and it funds development projects around the globe. But sometimes, well-meaning development projects result in human rights violations. In the worst cases, villagers get displaced from their homes, workers are abused, protesters are jailed or beaten, or the environment is destroyed. Faced with criticism over these worst cases, the World Bank created 2 court-like bodies to hear human rights complaints related to World Bank projects. These bodies are called the Inspection Panel and the Compliance Advisor Ombudsman, or CAO, and they're what we refer to as quasi-judicial bodies. They're not government-run courts, but they do hear cases, and their purpose is to hold the bank accountable to a set of ethical standards. After all, what's the point of fulfilling the bank's mandate to alleviate poverty if in the process, projects pollute life-sustaining water sources or forcibly displace local communities? These quasi-judicial bodies are unusual because they allow citizens and communities to bring cases directly. You don't need a state to file on your behalf. Also, these bodies will hear complaints against private companies and NGOs, not just complaints against governments. The bank created the Inspection Panel and CAO to hold itself accountable to human rights and environmental standards. But can an organization really police its own projects?
A good way to understand how these bodies function is to talk through one of the cases brought before them. In 2011, the World Bank provided funding for a Mongolian mine called the Oyu Tolgoi mine because it thought the mine would strengthen and diversify Mongolia's economy. However, the mine expansion took place in a rural area where villagers mainly herded animals for a living. Local herders opposed the mine because it affected their cultural practices, and, even worse, mine owners coerced their fellow villagers into unfair labor contracts. In order to protest the mine's construction, villagers filed a complaint with the CAO. They alleged that the mine negatively impacted their livelihood, and the CAO set about investigating their complaint. The villagers had some help. They worked with a local NGO called Gobi Soil and an American organization called Accountability Council that advises many communities in these types of complaints. The CAO found merit in the villagers' complaint. They ordered changes to the project and mandated financial payments to villagers and the creation of scholarships for children in displaced families. Perhaps not a perfect resolution from the villagers' perspective, but still significant.
But is it common for communities to succeed in altering projects or securing compensation, or are most complaints ignored? To find out, a team of researchers in the Security and Political Economy Lab at USC coded data on every case that has ever been filed with the Inspection Panel or CAO. Here's what we found. It turns out that communities are successful in their complaints fairly often. Sometimes success only means a formal acknowledgement that the bank is at fault. But in about 40% of complaints, the Inspection Panel or CAO either mandates that financial compensation be paid or that a project be altered or terminated.
Financial compensation and project change are forms of what can be called restorative justice or compensatory justice because they are focused on reconciliation with the victims and the community at large, but don't punish the offenders. In the most serious cases, the World Bank can choose to punish the perpetrators of human rights violations. While the bank can't throw anyone in jail, it can bar a firm or a government from receiving new bank funds for several years. However, our analysis shows that the bank never once took this step until an egregious case in Uganda involving child rape, and that didn't happen until 2015. In the case of the Mongolian mine, for example, the CAO chose not to punish the mine operators who had coerced villagers into unfair contracts. Instead, the CAO mediated the dispute between the two parties and created a council that gave equal representation to the herders, the mining company, and the local government in order to solve further disputes. These resolutions seemed fair, but there are currently concerns about their implementation. The case of the Mongolian mine illustrates a fundamental weakness of the Inspection Panel and CAO. They are effective at providing restorative or compensatory justice that benefits impacted communities. However, they're ineffective at providing punitive justice, directly punishing people who commit human rights abuses on World Bank projects.
And that's perhaps the biggest takeaway from our research. When communities bring complaints before these bodies, it's pretty common that they get some form of relief. but punishment is rarely forthcoming. That finding and our analysis of the factors leading to complaint success are really important for improving the design of quasi-judicial bodies. Almost every development bank has set up institutions that emulate the CAO and inspection panel. The more we know about how the originals are working, the better we can do at improving the copies.